If you're building a medical device and want to eventually get acquired, or if you've ever wondered why some products really crush it and others just stall out, this episode is for you. I sat down with Brent Lavin. This guy spent 20 years inside some of the largest organizations, GE Healthcare, CR Bard, Becton Dickinson, leading product development, commercial strategy, and mergers and acquisitions. He's now the founder at Ironwood Medtech Partners, where he helps companies figure out what to build next, how to build it, how to actually get it to market and get it adopted. And what you'll learn today is what the strategics are actually looking for during acquisitions, what makes your company a good acquisition target, and how to manufacture that yourself. The 3 things you'll need to nail your commercial strategy before launch, and the 1 mistake he sees product teams make over and over again. So I know you're gonna love this episode. Let's get into it. Brent Lavin, I am so thrilled to have you on the pod today. I know the listeners are going to learn a ton today about product commercialization, M&A, how to do product development the right way, the nuance that people miss, all the fun stuff about that journey. So yeah, let's just jump into it. Brent, welcome to the pod. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for the invite. I love talking about this stuff and I'm excited about today.
Awesome. So for those that don't already know you, would love if you could just give the audience a quick intro. We met and had another call before this, and I was like, dude, I think we went 30 minutes over the time we had because we just couldn't. I was like, this guy's awesome. I want to just keep talking to him. But for those that hadn't had the honor and privilege of talking to you live like I have, tell the audience who you are.
Yeah. So Brent Lavin, obviously, I started out of undergrad as an engineer, right? And I wanted to make things, innovate, and product development was kind of my passion. But I learned pretty quickly that I didn't want to be an engineer the rest of my life. I like being in the lab, but I didn't love it enough to build my career on it. But what I did like is the customer interaction and understanding the unmet needs that we were solving. And so I went back and got my MBA to pursue this thing that I didn't know at the time was product management. And so out of undergrad, I was able to jump on with GE and work at GE Healthcare in the imaging space. I did that for about 6-7 years, and then came out here to Phoenix and worked for CR Bard, as you mentioned, much smaller organization, and really cut my teeth on innovation, product launches, M&A. We were eventually bought by Becton Dickinson, a much larger organization. And I went on to lead product development teams, and then eventually work in a strategy and portfolio management role, all around innovation, inorganic and organic product launches. And that's really been kind of my passion in medtech for the last 20 years.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think there's something to be said about being inside very big organizations, and even different sizes of big. You know what I mean? Big comes in many different shapes and sizes, kind of thing. And then going out and doing the entrepreneurial thing. I once met this guy. He was talking at an event I was at, and he was basically I don't invest in entrepreneurs that hadn't spent at least 10 years at a company. You know what I mean? And so I think there's something to be said for that. And by the way, quick plug, and I know it's going to be in the intro, but Ironwood Health, you guys go check it out. Ironwood Health Partners, go follow it. Brent's, that's your new shop, correct?
Yeah. So I just recently started my entrepreneurial journey in Ironwood Medtech Partners, and we offer fractional services really at the intersection of product ownership, product strategy, innovation, and commercialization. So helping organizations to identify, execute, and launch the next product in the company.
So I want to talk about the product development piece and the product launch stuff. I feel like we've been doing things from a product development standpoint, even broader product journey of the life cycle of a med tech company and the inception, and then this stage and that stage and seed and series A. I feel like the product development operations and things have been very much the same, and we're doing things kind of the way we were 10 or 15 years ago. Are you seeing signs where we are fundamentally changing how we are innovating, or do you think people are just getting faster at doing it the same way? I feel like we need a fundamental change in how we're doing it, and there may be people doing it that you're aware of, right?
I would say 10, 15 years ago, I think you could sit down 20 years ago, you could sit with a physician who had an idea. And I think it was very much of a legitimate path to execute on their idea and bring that to market. And that would likely help a sufficient size of the market to do something better, faster, different. I think technology has improved. Healthcare has become a lot more complex. So when you sit at that physician dinner, you really have to take a step back and understand what problem are we going to solve for what patient population, and then how are we going to prove it?
Yeah.
And so it's no longer sufficient to have just a good widget. It has to affect an outcome and improve the financial bottom line as well as the care of the patient. So it's just more complex. And so there are some bigger risks involved, and it does take longer today. And so I think that's what's I guess changed the landscape of innovation.
Yeah. I, it's so frustrating, and like it feels like it's taking longer and costing more money. Whereas like you look at other things and it's like, oh, the cost and time to ship software is like going in the exact opposite direction at a million miles an hour. One of my personal takes on this is like, that saying of like when you're working in the business versus working on the business, right? And obviously like when you're working on the business, especially as an executive, that's where you want to be. You're not in the weeds. You're making like hot, strategic changes that are optimizing the entire organization, making it more efficient. So I feel like we have a million brilliant people working and doing innovation in medtech, but they are like working in innovation. And there's like a very small number of people that are working on innovation in the sense of like tools and flows and systems and things like that that can help like the engineer get from like, concept to design review meeting 2 faster and on less money, right? Or design review meeting 2 to FDA submission faster and on less money. And like, I think like I look at, it's like, is this really happening? It's like half of people are still using like a paper-based, Excel spreadsheet, Word doc, DocuSign, quality management system, right? And it's like, there are solutions that exist. There's great ones. Quick shout out to Viva Quick Vault, right? But I don't see that many people doing it. I think like Serge at Product Flow is like one person that's trying to like build the tools for innovators to do the things faster. I think we're trying to do some of that at Exo and MedTech vendors, but like, are there companies that are doing it internally that you've seen? Are there groups that we should be aware of that are trying to work on innovation and build tools for people to do these things faster?
Yeah, so I'm a massive fan of what started at Stanford, the Stanford Bio design process, and understanding, again, fundamentally at day zero, what problem are you solving, and creating the user needs from one step back or 2 steps back, to your point about looking at it from an ecosystem and a holistic viewpoint. I'm a big fan of being in the clinic, in the procedures, and watching things. And that's where you observe what's actually going on versus what people are telling you, whether that's in papers or from the podium. Or even in conversations, you can see things that you didn't, that people didn't even recognize they were doing.
Yeah.
Now, on your point about efficiencies, I do think we shortchange ourselves in medtech because we are a regulated industry. We treat even concept development like a regulated activity, and that's not.
Yeah.
We should be working as quickly as possible to get prototypes in front of a physician, because that's the way that we're going to get the real feedback necessary.
Yeah, no, totally agree. Like dovetails into the next question I was going to ask. Like, where in development do you see startups like really trip up and like get stuck? Or I guess startups or corporate development teams, right? Like, where in that product development do you see them get the most stuck or get the most wrong?
Yeah, I would say that just generally that people commit to their solution too early in the process. And sometimes they're not willing to take multiple prototypes out to a physician and get feedback, because we tend to treat innovation like a straight line. First we do this, then we do that, and we get this result. And that fuzzy front end of innovation is really iterative. And sometimes you need to take that extra step and take that extra prototype out. Because as the innovation process is really a very early innovation, but then it's a long documentation and execution phase.
Mm-hmm.
And so spending an extra month, week, quarter in that early innovation phase may prove to be the beneficial factor at the very end. Go slow to go fast.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Is there like an underappreciated nuance in your mind specific to like product development that like you wish you could just tattoo on the chest of everybody in medtech that's doing product development? Like you wish they practiced it religiously?
Yeah, I think it's really around the workflow. And I come from most recently the interventional space, and maybe it's obvious because you often have circulating techs, you have scrub techs. And
so you mean like clinical workflow, almost like human
clinical factors. Workflow. Yeah. So I'll tell the story. We would get feedback from physicians about products and product ideas, and it was perfect to them. But when you actually go watch cases, it's the tech at the back table that struggles to unbox it or put it on the wire or struggles to get it all set up correctly. And that's going to be the gating factor to it. I think you see this in health tech as well. There's a lot of great data out there. I just saw some teaching today about wearables, and it's great to have that information, but it never gets to the physician, to your primary care physician. So it's data for data's sake. It's not integrated through the entire workflow.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Human factors is like super, super important. I interviewed, had Jeremy Ridley on the pod from like Delve Product Development, and like they're like a crazy, awesome, really good product development firm. And he had these like, they'll be working on products like hardware, software enabled. He talked about like the design arcs that they have for the software side, or like the sprints that they have for the software side, and then like the design review meeting cadence and the arcs that they have, and like how they sync these up and all of that stuff. But human factors was like one of the things that they take like so seriously. And there's like so many ways that it can go wrong. like yeah. Oh, we recruited from like one hospital and they almost all do only one type of procedure. You know what I mean? And like, that's the type of procedure we're training on. It's like, no, you need to get a good mix of like people that 1 out of every 8 cases they do, maybe your type of case, right? So they're like less knowledgeable, but that's like more true to the mean. You know what I mean? But it's so important to understand that, and like literally eyes on watch these people interact with your device, and don't just like skimp it on the sample size. Like obviously you don't need like 300 if the sample size calls for 15, but it's always good to have more. I've found in human factors.
Yeah, I think unfortunately we treat human factors, and it's a necessary part of the regulation and the summative study, but we often teach to the test.
Yeah,
and we often aim for passing and something that's submission worthy, instead of truly understanding what are the gaps that could lead to unintended consequences in the procedure. And so if we were truly looking at it like uncovering the gaps and the problems, we would increase the sample size, or we would get people from around the country more than just our backyard. And so let's not teach to the test when we're talking about usability.
That's really important. The other thing that you mentioned that like struck me was like kind of the like, there's all this great data, but is it like really getting to the physician? I feel like with a lot of companies, especially like that are generating data, like it'll be like, oh, well, we generate these like amazing insights and there's a dashboard and you can view all of this stuff and blah, blah. And it's like, yeah, but who's going to do that? Right? Like, is there currently a person, say you're selling to clinics, right? Like, is there currently a person at that clinic that has a spare 2 hours a day or hour a day to ingest and then weaponize these insights that you're giving them? And are they tech savvy? And you know what I mean? Like, how much training will it take to get them there? Because like, if you're generating all this data and this beautiful platform and whatever, and it's like, they don't have the person or the capacity to like handle more data and a new platform right now, like, then it's kind of a fool's errand, especially if that's like a critical part of the usability of your thing is like the insights you generate off of it.
Exactly. It's like, how does it impact that patient care? And does it get to the right decision maker? Can they make the proper decision of it? And how does it impact what they're doing today? So I just, when you go back to what do I wish I could tattoo on every, product development expert's arm, it would be, watch the usability. Because I think that'll be the pitfall most often.
Yeah, and I know we mentioned this whenever we talked the other, but it's like can you imagine a Formula One, car engineer not ever having seen in person a Formula One race? You know what I mean? Like obviously not, but it's like there are probably the majority of medical device engineers that have never been in a surgery and seen, a case live, right? And been able to kind of like peek around and see how stuff is used and see the flow and see the timing and all of that stuff, which it's like, and I get that it's harder. They don't sell tickets to total knee replacements, which they could, I'd buy one, but but there's some interesting people, and like I think up in Michigan they have, I know like Switchback Medical, they've got, or Switchback, and then there was another one, I forget the name, but there's some programs that some of the CDMOs and places up there they have with like the University Medical Center where they'll have engineers come in and watch cases and things like that, which is pretty interesting. This is kind of an aside, but I'm curious, like, your thoughts on this. Like, everybody knows that healthcare needs to be cheaper, right? And I think part of that, there's a million ways you could make it cheaper, like, in general, better care, more preventative, yada, 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 yada. If you look at kind of like what are the things that's driven the increased cost of care, like the absolute like bloat of the administrative layer in healthcare is like it's outpaced the growth of physicians by like 100-fold, I think. I mean, it started in the 90s and it's gotten like worse and worse and worse. But like I hold out like this big hope that we will start to see like digital health solutions and other things where you can come in and like take out thirds and big chunks of administrative layers of hospital staff, frankly, just because it's like, hey, like what you were doing we can now do with like, you know, AI enabled like automations, workflows, software, all of this stuff. And I think insurance is a huge part of this because it's like the whole like we're going to deny it and you have to appeal it and all the documentation to even submit it the first time. I feel like that's a huge chunk of what a lot of this administrative layer goes to. But like there's no reason why we should have, you know, 20 administrators for every one nurse or, you know, two nurses and one doctor to provide care. It just doesn't take that much paperwork to actually provide care.
Yeah, and if I could just take it to a macro level from a global scale, I think one of the things that I'm concerned about as we continue to innovate is just the fragmentation of regulatory agencies around the world. And so, you know, MDR is one in Europe, right, where they've created another parallel approval system, you know, beyond the CE mark. And then, you know, other countries have followed suit. And so there's this fragmentation where companies now need to be able to create the Rubik's Cube that allows them to get approved in all these various geographies. And those regulations are similar, but slightly different. And so you're trying to fit everything into this box. And so if we could have some harmonization and some more consistency globally, that would help companies in bringing things global to then, you know, maximize the opportunity for patients.
I've never really thought about that, frankly, Brent, but like it seems kind of crazy that we don't have like, at least amongst like G7 or like very industrialized nations, right? So whenever I got my nursing degree, whatever, I take the NCLEX, I pass it. There was like 27 states that were in this compact where it's like, hey, if you pass the NCLEX and you get your BSN and your licensure in this state, it's good in this state, that state, whatever. You've got to imagine if it's like safe for someone in the US and blah, 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 like taking some like small ethnographic differences that are, I feel like mainly with drugs, but like taking those maybe aside, is there anyone working on that? Hearing you say it, I was like, yeah, that does make sense. How has that not been at least push forward like in an aggressive way to say like, hey, we have like a global FDA clearance equivalent type thing?
Yeah, I can say that, you know, MDR has been going through various changes where they are bringing things back more towards, I guess, harmonization is the term I'll use. I'm not a regulatory expert. But what I would say is, you know, Europe has lost access to certain product lines because the manufacturers were not able to cross that boundary, I guess, and create all the data that MDR had required. So frankly, patients lost access to products that were previously approved in those countries. And so it's just kind of a loss for healthcare and for patients in general. And I know MDR has been moving back toward that, but hopefully government agencies realize that it's all just a burden on the manufacturers and they have to satisfy that somehow. So that leads to increased costs or lost access.
Yeah. And like, honestly, it kind of benefits the fragmentation really benefits like the megacorps mostly because like they have the money to like get clearance in all these different fragmented areas and do this testing. But it's like, if you're a small to mid-sized device company and you're like, are we going to pay another $250,000 to redo this testing because they wanted like 2 negative controls and 2 positive controls instead of 1, or they're just not going to do it. And that means those patients don't get those devices. But it also means that like those megacorps like get to gobble up that much more of those markets in lieu of like, you know, the smaller and medium-sized corps in other countries just not going after them.
Yeah, I think this creates kind of an acquisition risk for the startup company. If their goal is to exit to a strategic, I can tell you from evaluating those companies on the strategics side, we expect not that the work is done, but that the work is able to be done easily.
Yeah.
And so there are data points in the clinical trial. There are, you know, certain demographics that are enrolled. You know, there's bench testing that's going to allow us to then go do it. And to your point, sometimes we've passed because certain companies just don't have the capability of even giving us the data that would allow us to go do that. And so it seizes up that acquisition market.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I was just thinking somebody like you could build a tool that's basically like, give us your full FDA submission file, and then we will just plug it in, and then we'll tell you exactly what you're missing for MDR or whatever, right? Like,
There may be that tool out there. I'm not aware, but maybe I
yeah,
should do some
it,
searching on it.
it may exist. So we are going to get into like some M&A stuff here in a bit, but like let's just for like one or two more things on the development side. So like say you're at design freeze, say you're like early stage, maybe mid stage company, right? Like you're at design freeze, you're starting V&V testing, maybe you're 6 months from submission, 9 to 12 months from market entry. Like what are the three most critical pieces of your commercial strategy that you need to be focusing on at that point in time? Like building, getting ready, etc.
Yeah, I would say that it really comes down to segmentation, targeting, and positioning. So segmentation is which aspects of the market are you going after? Are you going after hospital physicians that are vascular surgeons that do X number of procedures per month? Are they using a certain competitive product? Targeting is then which of those are you going to go after first, second, and third? Who's your highest volume, perhaps, or your most influential customers? And then positioning, how are you going to message versus the competition? How are you enabling these physicians to either do something better or to do a new procedure? And so that's really your kind of your messaging and go-to-market platform. And then you plug in your health economics, you plug in your physician training, you plug in your go-to-market exhibits and all of the communication strategy. But those are the three key things I would focus on.
Yeah. And so like, let's just like walk through, I'm pretty simple-minded. So like, let's walk through an example, like help unpack this for me and the audience.
Yeah.
Like, I want to start with like positioning, right? So say you've got some type of like interventional catheter, right? There may be 6 other devices that basically can be used to do the exact same interventional procedure, right? But let's say yours, for whatever reason, causes less X or more Y. And that means like you are better suited and more valuable for people that are doing like high risk STEMI cases versus like some other, general interventional type cases or something like that, right? Like, but you need to know that about how are they positioned? Are they targeting general? Or are they targeting this? Like, or the positioning element, right? Like we are the go-to for amongst these procedures or this type of procedure, right? There's a strata of patients and types and severity and acuity. We are going to position ourselves as the go-to for this thing. Is that what you mean by positioning?
Yeah, let me give you a real world example, but I think you hit it spot on in that your positioning really needs to, the best positioning is around the particular segments of the patients or the types of procedures that you enable. It's not just, I do it faster than a different product.
Yeah.
You need to allow these physicians to treat a new patient population, do something new or better. And so the real world example would be Stroud Medical. We bought that company in 2020 through BD, and we were bringing the Rotarex atherectomy system into the market. There were 6, 7 competitors on the atherectomy market, but they were all slightly different and they all attacked certain areas of the disease process. Rotarex, because it had the combination of atherectomy and thrombectomy together, was particularly well suited for mixed morphology, thrombotic and calcific lesions, as well as in-stent restenosis. And so we went after those types of cases very specifically because other ones would not have performed well, and it wasn't our strong suit. So that's an example where you're enabling a procedure for the physician.
Right. Okay. And to me, almost in my mind, it's like you have to start with that, right? Frankly, because then once you know that, then you can go over to your segmentation and say, okay, what physicians are actually doing these procedures at a high volume that are like going to be the daily driver critical users for us because they're doing a lot of these. And like, that's where, quick plug here, Alpha Sophia, like you can use a data intelligence platform like Alpha Sophia and say, hey, I'm going to go look up these specific CPT codes where you have this mixed morphology, and then see who is billing and coding for those, right? And then how they've been trending over time. And then to that point, like who are they working with on from an open payment standpoint, consulting, who do they have kind of like financial relationships with already? Maybe you want to attack those. Maybe you want to avoid them depending on your size and your strategy there. But like, and then once you've got that segmentation, you can then say, okay, who are we going to target first? Like, I see a lot of people that are just like, I'm just going to target the top 10. And it's like, people don't realize like it's a fine strategy for your first year to like just target like the Eastern Seaboard or like kind of this Northeast corner or like Southeast corner or Midwest, because like, especially in like orthopedics and spine and stuff like that, you will eat up so much cost shipping cases and trays around and shipping implants and all of that stuff. And then like having just the boots on the ground to go cover those cases, like going, global or like national especially national with like a sales launch, is like really hard to do. Like I think a
Yes.
lot of big companies don't even do that. They roll it out in like waves and things like that because you learn a lot. It's easier to manage. You save. There's some efficiencies there on shipping. Like, is that how? That's kind of my take on the segmentation and targeting. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts on that. I think what we're going to see in 2026 going forward, I think there's going to be, in many segments, a very legitimate strategy of segmentation by site of service, especially as the ASCs become more enabled to do these inpatient only procedures. And so I think if you're a medtech marketer right now, you should absolutely be thinking about site of service
Mm-hmm.
and how you're segmenting for that. I can also say another point that is often a myth for startup companies is I want to go after academic medical centers. And that sounds great because they are the thought leaders and they do get published. They're incredibly hard to get into. And then secondarily, because they're academic medical centers, they typically have everything on the shelf and
Yeah.
they're teaching to all of the devices. And so that can feel good to get on the shelf, but it's not going to gain much utilization.
Yeah.
And the process to get there is really long. And so I do think in an early launch process, you're often better starting in a smaller base and then building from there, to your point.
Yeah. You ask anybody, like the academic medical centers do not pay the bills. Like the people that
No.
pay the bills is the doc in semi-rural that just crushes cases because he's the only person that does that in like a 60-mile radius, right? And like he cranks volume just nonstop, right? Those are the people that really pay the bills. Those are your repeat users.
Yeah.
And if you can win them over, those will be
And
like stable sources of growth.
yeah, and I would also be really cautious of really kind of the thought leader or the person, again, in the interventional world that is pushing the envelope in terms of complexity, because you want your early cases to be awesome. And sometimes those interventionalists are so used to their current product or procedure that they're easily adopting the new stuff. And so you want somebody that's coachable, that you can be in every single case and make sure that you get those early wins and successes.
Yep, absolutely. I think trend lines on like procedure growth is a big one too, right? Like, are they doing more of these? Are they, you know what I mean? Like, especially if you're looking at younger people, you know, to be able to see that. And by the way, Alpha Sophia, the sites of care piece was like really, really great and is very important. Alpha Sophia does have segmentation by sites of care. So just for any of the
Yeah.
people out there listening. Okay, so I wanted to talk about this. This has been like kind of a concept I've been kicking around in my head of like, we've got to do this. We got to do this. It feels unsustainable. So my thought here is like, until the time and the cost required for device development and clinical studies like drops significantly, like I really fear that we're gonna see a hollowing out of a lot of like the class 1 and class 3 innovations. What I mean by that is like with class 1, like the ASP is so low with class 1 devices that if it takes like $3 or $4 million and you know multiple years to get it on the market, like you're not probably ever going to reach a revenue mark that's going to fetch you that like positive acquisition outcome, because like if it's class 1, it may be commoditized and the sales price is going to be lower, but then you're like trying to charge a higher ASP because you got to make up this money because you know you got this, it took all this time and energy and effort and you got to make that money back. And so it just makes these class 1 devices that are like absolutely great, should be on the market, should be helping patients, but the economics to get it there and get a return are not. So it kind of makes the venture itself not investable as like a single product company. And on the flip side, it's like if a class 3 device takes, you know, 60 million and 9 years from inception to reach FDA clearance and then 12 years to exit, right? I feel like a lot of early stage investors are going to look at that IRR over 12 years or 9 years or whatever and think they're probably just better off putting their money in the S&P and having it 4x over 10 years. You know what I mean? But I feel like the cost and the time of development being what it is, like we have to shrink that, because then it makes medtech a more attractive investment, which, you know, brings more capital into the space, brings more innovations and helps more patients, because it's especially early stage medtech. I feel like the capital market for it's just been hollowed out and it's just a mess right now. I don't know if you agree, disagree.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I spent most of my recent time in class 3. So I'm going to speak to that kind of more directly. That if I were, you know, to wave a magic wand, the biggest thing that I would prefer to do that I think could spur this is that if you attain the breakthrough designation, that you get immediate reimbursement.
Yeah.
Because again, startups don't realize that once you get FDA approval, that just starts the process to get into the hospital and to gain the reimbursement that's necessary. And so unfortunately, you see a lot of innovation around existing CPT codes, which to a degree is incremental in a lot of ways. And
Just like the
so
510K. Yeah. Like with class two, it's like,
yeah,
it's innovative, but
yeah, but you're forced into this substantial equivalence, or you're forced into CPT code with an APC that locks you into a payment. So if you want to do something that's revolutionary, you're either cutting your margin or you're going after a new CPT code, which is again another couple of years. And so again, if I could just wave the magic wand, it would be to take that breakthrough, make it immediate reimbursement. And I do think that would unlock some of this. But unfortunately, medtech is up against AI and health tech and some of these other areas for investment. And so,
yeah.
it is not the most attractive place to be right now.
Yeah. Can we just dig in on that for a second? Like the reimbursement code piece, because I honestly hadn't thought about it in terms of the impact it has on, like, I understand the impacts on, like, once you get clearance, you still have to apply for that new CPT code and all of those things. And, like, if you get breakthrough, you do get like some like benefits on the NTAP, new technology add-on payment, right? Like, and there are some benefits, but that rule, like you said, needs to be reinstated of like, you get immediate reimbursement if you're breakthrough technology designation. But I think the point about, like, you could have, 6 technologies, 4 that are just hyper legacy, been on the market for a long time, that are like do the job, but it's not as good. And then one that's relatively new that does a much better job than the other ones. And then one that's brand new that has just exceedingly good data, much better than all 5 solutions, twice as good as the legacy 4. And they're all reimbursed at the same rate. That, like, kind of on its face seems crazy, kind of crazy. It kind of flies in the face of like the value-based care, because it's like, well, we're not getting value-based purchasing on the device side. It's kind of like you fit in that box. It's almost like you can't do too good of a job, because then you'll have to go for your own CPT and then you'll lose, like, it makes the hill so much tougher to climb. So it's kind of like innovate in this box, but like not too far out. And then, but you can't charge that much more. Like, you're competing with this stuff that's worse and cheaper, but you're getting paid the same for it. Like, it kind of is like a huge innovation barrier, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think where I see this go wrong is actually when people just ignore the reimbursement landscape at the time
Yeah.
of concept, and they're just, we're going to figure it out when we get closer. But unfortunately, that really does drive your business case, because if you are forced into a CPT code of other, devices, you're either fixed into that payment and you have to accept it and take the margin difference, or you have to build in the time and the clinical evidence in order to get a new CPT code, or to wait for it to revalue. And that revaluation process is a couple of years. And so you'd have to have the business case, the basically minimal revenue for that period of time. And it makes true innovation really a really small needle to thread.
Yeah. And the part I kind of want to dig in for a second on is, like, so I understand. So, like, the AMA controls the CPT codes, right? There's an AMA board, right? And then that is basically kind of in, harmony, recognized and implemented then by by CMS, right? And then private payers will, like, negotiate kind of with the company their own reimbursement rates, after that, right? So I guess if we were looking at, like, who's the culprit here, and like, why is it so difficult and takes so long, et cetera, to get a new CPT code created, or even like an add-on code, right, created? Does it really come down to like the 16 people on the AMA, board that's making these decisions? Like, not to, well, I will point fingers here. Like, I want to know whose fault this is.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit, unfortunately, it's tragedy of the commons, where it is a little bit of the system and kind of the structure that we have built up. But I do think you point back to, the AMA has a lot of influence in this entire process. And the
Yeah.
AMA is driven by societies that are staffed by, clinical specialists in their particular, specialty, right? And unfortunately, specialties don't always get along. They don't always get paid according to, similar rates for similar things. And so you really do need to think through, if you're replacing a surgery with a non-interventional procedure, you got to think about who you're displacing for that procedure. And I do think, a neurostimulation, I think, is going to be the next battleground for this, where we now have device-based interventions that can replace pharmaceuticals.
Yes.
And that's going to be a very stiff uphill battle because of the pharmaceutical, interests that are out there. And so I can tell you, I would much rather have a device-based intervention than take a pharmaceutical for the rest of my life. As a patient, I'm not going to be able to determine that. It's going to be determined by AMA and CMS and some of these other economic factors.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I understand that it's like creating individual CPT codes for like every device based on their kind of like relative value, based on their data, whatever. Like that's obviously not feasible, right? But it seems like the other extreme of like, if it's this procedure, it's this CPT code and that's it, is also like, seems completely dumb and has the issues that we've just gone over. But I'm going to look this up once we get off the podcast, but like the number of new CPT codes, because it's mostly class 3 that are going after new codes. I mean, probably there are some class 2s and stuff, right? But it's like by sheer nature of it, if you're a class 2, you have substantial equivalency and you probably can fit in a code that exists, right? I'm curious, like recently and then over time, how it's changed. Like, are the majority of companies that are getting new CPT codes, new innovative or smaller companies, and then they get these new CPT codes and then they're acquired, right? Or is it the larger legacy organizations that are actually going out and getting the majority of these new CPT codes issued? You see what I'm saying?
My hypothesis would be the former, that it is a startup that, has communicated this as their path toward an eventual valuation, because it's going to be all pre-revenue. And so your funding sources have to be comfortable with that kind of timeline. So that would be my guess. And I'd be curious what you find out.
Yeah, I'm almost thinking too, it's like, okay, if AMA is made up by different members of this, like these medical societies, right? Is what I understand, right? Is that right?
Yeah.
So, I would bet that if you looked at those, the powers that be, the legacy companies, if they're getting like a small share of like new CPT codes issued, that complacency on new CPT code issuance protects their like hegemony over the market. The people that they have financial relationships with that are running these societies, that they are paying $250,000 to be a gold, platinum, super diamond plus sponsor for their events and their conferences, right? Like they don't want them to put their foot on the pedal to create more new CPT codes because it threatens their position if they've got new stuff coming out. So anyways, I don't want to get down a rabbit hole on that. I'm just going to get pissed off thinking about it.
I do think it's important. It's an important point to then have, to continue to have physician-led innovation, right? Because the physicians are what's driving the societies. And so as you have physicians giving you design inputs, giving you feedback and helping you determine what good looks like, they can be working with their partners and helping guiding you through that process.
Yeah, I agree. It just almost feels like it's like socialism in the sense of like the doctor does the procedure, one doc does it, the other doc does it. One doc uses cutting edge technologies and gets much better outcomes. The other one uses like crappy, cheap stuff, gets reimbursed the same, has worse outcomes, but like they get paid the same for that procedure. And you can be like, oh, there's downstream and there's that. It's like, but that doesn't really like, that's not it. You know what I mean? Like it would seem kind of like a competition, market driven capitalist solution to say like, hey, if your doc wants to use better technologies to give you better outcomes, they should get reimbursed more to do that. And if you had that as a rule in mass, what would you have? You would have doctors trying to push the envelope and do better care with better devices, better outcomes, and ultimately everybody wins there. And I get obviously like there has to be like a limit to this, but right now it is a low competition framework that exists today, which is frustrating. Okay. Moving on. That was fun. Thank you for indulging me on that though. So on to kind of like the M&A side, because I know this is something that a lot of the audience will love to hear about. So what's your process? Just like high level, we'll get more into some of the specific things, but like overview of your process for evaluating early stage device ideas.
Yeah. So I'm going to speak kind of from the strategic viewpoint. And again, this is what I help, companies, smaller companies get ready for, with Ironwood Medtech Partners. But from a strategic perspective, it always starts with strategy. So what are the disease states? What are the technologies? And what are the call points that, the strategic is satisfying, and how do they want to grow their business? You're typically wanting to grow into higher growth segments. And so you're always monitoring and projecting where you want to take your technology, your call point and everything over the next 3 to 5 years. And I think what's interesting is in the last year, in 2025, we've seen a lot of divestitures. And what that results in, that produces headroom for these strategics to then go out and buy some of these companies. So we can take that as an aside, but as an evaluation standpoint, you're looking at, does it fit our strategy? And then from an innovation standpoint is, does it have a competitive advantage? And then thirdly, like, what is the sales process? And does that fit with our current call point and processes, or do we need to create something new? And kind of based on all of those, you decide which ones you're going to move forward and which ones you're not. But, a strategic is constantly evaluating the entire landscape. And so always looking for, ways that we can advance care and then plug that into our distribution model.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. What do you think the landscape of, marketing channels and content distribution, right? And how content reaches audience, like, is shifting like really rapidly. How do you think this impacts medtech companies and their strategy, like trying to get their message to the right people? Like, are you thinking about it the same way as you did 2 years ago, 5 years ago? Like, how are you thinking about it today?
Yeah, I think the landscape has significantly changed in the last 5 years. The pendulum was already swinging, but COVID accelerated really lack of access to healthcare professionals from a direct sales force. And I think that's so unfortunate because these sales professionals play an integral role in helping, the healthcare providers to have the latest, greatest technology, to use it correctly, to know which patients to use it on. And so when I started in this business, my customer was really the sales rep. And I did everything in order to help them be smarter, faster, more efficient. That world has changed as we've lost access. So now you need to layer on these omni-channel and more indirect communication through things like LinkedIn ads or conferences. And so it's the landscape has definitely diverged. And so you need a much more cohesive strategy that hits not only direct sales, but also these other omni-channel pathways.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think every single conference that I've heard anything about recently, especially like one where physicians attend, it has been like worse and worse and worse really since COVID, but like specifically in the past like year or two. I know someone that came back from a spine conference and they were like, that was crazy dead. Like, it was like so many industry people and then like not that many surgeons. And I think it's just because any academic stuff, webinars, workshops, like all of that stuff you can view from the comfort of your own home. You know what I mean? And people don't like travel's not as fun as it used to be. You know what I mean? It's like, and it's hard to get these people to take off like 2 or 3 days to go somewhere. And these conferences are also kind of exhausting, right? So it's like they're just being less attended. So it's like, okay, access individually, like for sales reps, is getting tougher. And then there's less and less attendance at conferences. And frankly, a lot of the surgeons that are going to the conferences are already locked up with people. You know what I mean? So like it really is like there has to be, you have to be reaching them in other ways, right? So like content strategy, digital strategy, these other things. I would even say like, read like local events almost, right? Like doing dinners and things like that with multiple surgeons involved, right?
That's exactly where I was going to go is, especially as, again, the pendulum swings to the employed physician model, they can't break away. But we've had a lot of success. I've seen a lot of success in more micro local events that are after hours. It might be 6:30 dinner and presentation, and it's a more intimate setting, more interactive. And then you're taking what's a PowerPoint and you're making it a discussion. And I think that's where these things are going, is towards the hyper local, small person events.
Yep. And just something that I've found, like, I beat the customer discovery drum every chance I get. Not enough people do it. Not enough people do it well or for long enough. And like it's just like, it's honestly one of the things where it's like, you tell me someone did an amazing job at customer discovery, that maybe over many other things would be like an indicator of them going to have success, right? But one of the things I've found it incredibly useful for, just a case study, and this is real world from like us doing it. So we were looking at licensing a technology called Vac Sponge. It's like basically a flexible suction irrigation probe that you use with like a suction irrigation handpiece, and then it goes like basically in with the trocar. Anyways, not really important what the device is here, but just wanted to give that a shout out. When we were going through the process of evaluating the technology and seeing if we wanted to license it, I used Alpha Sophia, found a bunch of surgeons that were doing these types of procedures. And I think I sent probably like 30, 40 emails and saying like, hey, we're evaluating a technology. I would love to get 15, 20 minutes of your time. I'll show you the technology, ask you some questions, and give you like a $50, maybe it was like $30 Starbucks gift card or whatever, prepaid Visa gift card, right? Had a bunch of surgeons say like, yep, yeah, let's do it, whatever. And I think like six of them were like coming to mind, right? Really great call. That was 18 months ago, right? And so we're basically at design, like we're at design freeze. We're getting, moving into V&V testing. We should be launching at Q1 or Q2. So recently followed up with those surgeons that I talked to and said, hey, same thread. Hey, we talked 18 months ago about this. We licensed it. We've developed it. It's here. Would love to get your feedback on it. And had another call with them. And every single one of them was like, yes, by the way, one of them said, are you doing a cadaver lab on this? Do you have anyone for it? I'd like to do it, right? Hey, whenever this is ready, please let me know ahead of time. I want to use this. I want to try this, right? Like every single one of them that I ended up like scheduling a follow-up call with said that. So now I've got 2 touch points and a relationship developed with target users and customers, right? 6 months before the product's even ready. Because I did that customer discovery work, that customer discovery work turns into like kind of product refinement, almost maybe it's design consulting if you keep going with them. But I feel like access is hard, right? But that is a way to kind of like build this groundswell of like relationships so that the access isn't as big of an issue if you have 6, 12, 18 people that feel like they almost had a part in building the device because they gave you feedback. What do I want? What do I need? And then it's there and it's ready and they know you. They've talked to you, right? And so anyway, that's one thing I think for early stage companies that are even a year out or so is to start to do those types of things and build those relationships in a non-sales like aggressive a way. And then like, frankly, like 2 of them were like, I didn't even ask. They were like, when this is ready, will you let me know? I want to use it. You know what I mean?
You should absolutely be developing relationships and long-term kind of conversations during the development process, even to the point of some of the messaging that I talked about before. I've definitely had relationships where I've sent early brochure concepts and said, give me feedback, tell me the reality here. And then they do feel bought in, right? And so I do think there's medical advisory boards for like the company, but I think there should also be product level advisory boards to an extent where you have ongoing touch points and then they become, advocates in the end.
Yep. Absolutely. Oh, and that's another thing. If you're an early stage company, you should put in your budget for like clinical design consulting, right? Like you can pay these people for their time. The big companies do it. You'd be shocked if you knew how much the big companies pay in design consulting and dinners and things like that to these people. And like their time is valuable, right? And like, you can try to play the startup card of like, oh, give me some of your time for free. And like, that will not get you as far as you think it will with a lot of people or not in the numbers that you'll want it to. Okay. So kind of back to the M&A piece. So I know you hit on this a little bit, but like, just to like, if there's anything to dive deeper, but like what actually makes a company a good M&A target in your mind?
Yeah. And first of all, it has to start with your strategy. It has to fit into your strategy in terms of where you want to take your portfolio and everything. But I think from a sales perspective, I can tell you a couple of different things. So do they have clear segmentation, targeting, positioning? Can they outline where they have called, who they've won, who they've lost? Can they give you a dashboard based on demo, in-service, and then closed timing and retention rates across that? I've seen that time and again where you think a customer is won, but then they stop using it. And so you want to see the consistency of order patterns and who they've either won or lost over time, because if they have retention issues, then maybe the product isn't quite as good as you think it is. Or maybe it's a really based on they don't feel comfortable using the product, but if the rep is in the room, then they'll use it. Well, that's not very scalable. So you're really trying to understand, can you take what is the start of, say, a commercial process, put it into your distribution channel and just pour gas on it. And you don't want to be figuring it out during integration. You want to be able to just apply resources and run. And so I would encourage any startup to be able to draw that roadmap out for the strategic and connect the dots. Don't trust that the strategic would connect those dots, because we really want to take it and just run and then accelerate the growth.
Yeah. So if you're a company that's like, I want to be a good target, and you think you've got your hit list of like 6 to 8 companies that could be good acquirers for you, like you talked about, it has to fit into their strategy. It has to fit into where they want to go and the sales call point, all of those things. Like, what are some good ways for early stage companies to like kind of uncover that. So say I've the company, I think strategic A would be a good acquire, right? And there's strategic, or strategic 1 and there's 1 through 6 or whatever. Like, how can I know and understand and investigate like their strategic focus, where it's going, like where they're wanting to grow, what they view as like a high growth area that they're trying to invest in. Like, is it reading 10Ks? Is it
Yes,
trying to talk to VPs at the company? Is like, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, so I would start, there's so much public information available. So first of all, what are the product lines that they have?
Yeah.
And so you can map that to disease state and call points and things like that. So what are the product lines that they have? They've generally done some investor day or certainly quarterly where they are talking about their innovation pipeline. And at a certain point, they're indicating this is where we're innovating. There's other acquisitions that they've done. If they've done acquisitions in your space, they're active.
So you see that as like, because I could see some people being like, oh well, they just acquired a company in this space. They maybe they shot their wad in that space. Like you're saying, like if they're active in that space, that is a green light for you.
100%. Yeah, 100%. I mean, not the same product line, right? Not the
Right,
same
sure.
CPT code, perhaps, but for sure, that's a green light for sure. And then physicians too, right? So you can understand like what other procedures, if they're using company A's product, what other products are they using either in that same case or in similar cases? And so then you can get an indication, okay, if they're doing a lot of aortic AAA repairs, they might also be doing X, and okay, so then the company might be going in that direction. And so a lot of good public information out there and things that you can learn.
I mean, even like, say you're on LinkedIn and you're like, say it's, I'm just going to use BD because it's top of mind with us right now. So say I think BD would be a great acquirer of my product, right? And let's say it's like in the interventional space, right? Like, I think I even suggested to someone to do this. So I'm curious if it's good or bad. But like, I was like, you should just find, especially one in your area, but like find a like account manager, right? Or maybe director of sales or something like that, but like on the kind of lower half of like the sales organization, right? And like try to buy them lunch, try to get a call with them, and then be like, hey, like help me understand like structure and divisions and call points of like your group, right? I feel like those people would be probably easier to access and get their time. And they could also tell you, it's like, yeah, like we have, our team does this and here's what we focus on and here's what we sell. And that's the same all over. Or, well, we're unique. Most of the company is like this, right? Like, is that like good, bad, wouldn't work? I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah. So I would say that Salesforce structure matters more than probably people imagine. And there's, again, a variety of ways to do that. You mentioned one. There's also consultancies out there that do map this thing out. And so if you know that they have a dedicated sales force to a certain disease state, that's a good indicator that they're going to want to add more products to that because they amateurize the fixed cost over a greater revenue base. And so if you can sell further into the account, into the same procedure with the same sales rep, that's a good thing to be selling towards that strategic. So to the extent that you can customize your approach and pitch to their situation, to sell towards the strategic, you're going to be better off.
Yeah, I could see how that would be a much more impressive you should acquire us pitch if it was like, this is your, talking to the strategic, this is your strategic roadmap, as you stated, XYZ of like these growth areas, which we fit into nicely. And the current structure of your interventional teams doing X, Y, and Z and selling in these call points give us the opportunity to sell deeper with, but like, I feel like that level of kind of coordination and understanding and communicating that clearly with the plan, like you talked about, like we want to be able to take it and run, pour gas on it, right? Like, I feel like that's a much better approach than like, you guys sell stuff like this.
I would take it even a step further and say, we know you manufacture in Costa Rica. We know you manufacture in Ireland. We know you manufacture in Europe, whatever it is. Our manufacturing happens to be in Costa Rica, or, to the extent that you can make it easy for them to see managing that distribution side, and even then helping them see how it's accretive on a margin standpoint. So again, public companies all have to report, and there's ways to drill down into the margin profile of their various businesses. If you're accretive to margin, that is a very strong selling point.
Yeah. Again, like this is me just doing this, but like, I feel like part of like what you're doing with like Ironwood Medtech Partners and like having someone that can kind of like help somebody understand like the strategic target and breaking down the 10Ks and like understanding where their margins are and where you would be accretive to their business or to their contribution or to their margins, right? Like that is not easy to do. Right. And like, it's a combination of knowing certain people and knowing certain companies and systems, and then also how to just like formulate all these things. So like, I think honestly, like hearing you talk through that so fluently, I was like, man, like that, I don't know that I couldn't do that. I would struggle with that. So anyways, I just think that's like a huge value that you like bring to the table on that piece. So M&A transactions in medtech have gotten bigger and bigger, and they've also gotten fewer and farther between. Like I did a write up and analysis on the HCB or some like big investment bank. They're like first half of 2025, like healthcare venture market or whatever, venture report, right? And it was literally like the size of acquisitions had almost quadrupled like over the past 2 or 3 years versus like the prior 3 or 4 years, right? And then the number of them had like plummeted, right? So like fewer of them and they're much bigger. Do you see this trend continuing? Do you see it plateauing, or do you see like kind of a reversal to more smaller deals?
Yeah, I could see this going in a couple of different directions, but my hypothesis would be that this is going to even out probably in the next year to 2 years, and a couple of reasons. One of which is that I mentioned earlier, there's these divestitures occurring across different disease states. Spine, Teleflex, BD is divesting. And so you get a smaller base and a more focused and targeted company that then has to grow through inorganic means.
Yeah.
And so when the company is larger, it's hard to get their attention. It's hard to move the needle. And so the acquisitions just by nature have to be larger. And so I think that's one factor that's going to attribute to this. I also think that, companies are buying later stage. And so some of these early startups are proving revenue certainty. And so I do think that deal flow will pick up in 26 and 27 as they continue to, prove commercial viability and sustainability, that the strategics will pick up.
Mm-hmm.
I also am really encouraged when I look across the strategic medtech landscape, and there's increasing investment from them through investment arms, that are making earlier and strategic bets in these companies, providing not only capital, but then also expertise. And so I think that's a good thing for the medtech ecosystem. As more of them see this as a competitive advantage, I think more will continue to fund through their own venture arms.
Yeah, I sure hope so. I mean, and to me too, like I know there are some that are doing that. I wish it was, I guess, more higher volume of it, because there's like it feels like there's a gap to fill that I'm not sure who's filling it right now. Like family offices, you could argue, are trying, but like with the VC flight to later stage, because like say, company that's like, oh, we manufacture in Costa Rica and here and there, and even just having like a board member that was a person, from the corporate BD or whatever, right? Like a arm of the business that was sitting on the board and being able to say like, hey, like, maybe you manufacture your thing at our facility in Costa Rica, right? Or tips and insights, and maybe there's data and other things. Like there is so much value with, small lift, but immense value that could be added to that early stage company by having that strategic, not just the money, but like the strategic insights, access to knowledge and information and data or whatever. Like I really think like their dollar could go 2 to 3 times further, as an early stage investment versus, some VC where they put finance bro on your board and, he or she doesn't know as much about medtech as you would like. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And again, I would flip the script a little bit, because in this environment, the onus kind of flips to the early stage seed funded company in order to be extremely clear about what problem they're solving, how they're going to solve it, and then how they're going to commercialize.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, what I see in many of these early stages, they start with the technology and they worry almost exclusively about technology while ignoring the regulatory path or the HEOR plan,
Sure,
clinical trial, or even the commercialization plan. And so again, to this extent that a seed company has a great technology, but then they can surround it with a great full plan that's clearly communicated, I think those are the ones that are going to stand out in this kind of competitive funding environment.
Yeah. This is a little bit random, but like I had this thought the other day. Do you remember like SPACs? They were like this huge thing, and then pretty much every single one of them just like absolutely imploded, And so I don't know that you would necessarily need to do this through a SPAC, but like I was having this thought the other day of like, you see a lot of them too. I see a ton of early stage companies, and like they're in, the ones I'm talking about are in pre-FDA, maybe just post-FDA, but a lot of like pre-FDA. They're doing V&V, maybe they're doing some clinical trial work, or they're like pretty much at design freeze or whatever. Really, really promising technologies, and a lot of them are like really struggling to raise capital. You know what I mean? And I think too, like looking at their cap tables, there is a probably like eye-poppingly small number that they would take in terms of an acquisition to, basically like, hey, if we do this now and all we've did was raise a pre-seed safe and then a seed round, and we can get a $4 or $5 million acquisition, like that may pay back every investor, and then the founders make good money. You see what I'm saying? Like my thought was like, I feel like there's like, you could have like a, hey, we're gonna do like a $60 million SPAC, and we go out and we buy 5 companies that are all really complementary of each other. We spend, 30 million acquiring these companies, and then we have like 20 to 30 million in OpEx to like grow this thing. I was just thinking in my head, I was like, I know for a fact the companies are out there, then they would do it. And I know if you had that amount of capital and like had those like kind of economies of scale and efficiencies and the ability to hire a direct sales force, like I don't know if anyone's doing that. I feel like there would be an opportunity for this kind of like this like SPAC roll up type thing, but like focusing on the early stage. And granted, there's risk, right? Especially like there's a period where, you'd have to keep pushing forward. But I think like the companies could almost like continue operating as their own little silos. You're just putting them under one umbrella and then like marshaling your commercial resources together, as well as like regulatory expertise, as well as, go down the list. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I have not had that thought, but now I'm gonna go on my run tomorrow and be thinking about how do we structure this, because I do think business model innovation will help unlock some of this.
Yep.
And you mentioned family offices, but there probably is a role of some consolidated portfolio company that could do something on this type of scale. The question is, what risk profile do you want to take? Technical/commercial risk do you want to take
Yeah.
with that type of investment? So.
Yeah, and frankly too, like let's say you did this and you bought 5 companies, right? Let's say 2 of them absolutely go bust. One of them kind of limps along, it's doing okay, it's generating revenue. One of them does really well, and then one of them like kind of hits it out of the park. That's still like on net, I think, going to end up making you back a good return at the end of the day, kind of thing.
I think what you're speaking to is probably the need in this space for an operator model. And I think that's what you're referencing is like a SPAC with an operator model versus a banker model. And I think that's why I'm personally excited to be now through Ironwood Medtech, offering fractional services, because I come from an operator background. I build things. I've launched products, right? So, for periods of time to hit a milestone, I can partner and then help them get over that next milestone to get that next funding level or the FDA submission or whatever that looks like.
Yeah. So we'll put this together. You'll be the chief commercial officer. You can work with these like 5 amazing, brilliant companies and like help push them forward. I see it clearly, Brent. Like
That's good.
I absolutely see it clearly. We just got to find some banker, some family office that wants to do this. But yeah, I mean, there's so much roll up M&A going on in the CDMO manufacturer world. It's like every other day, it's like, they just acquired so and so, and I know that's a different business, but like it's a bit of an analog. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think what you're talking to is operationalizing innovation. And I like to say this, that, innovation is a process, not a divine epiphany that you just get. No, you actually work through systems and you can evaluate different early stage prototypes, get feedback, make adjustments, and you progress through the process. And so innovation is absolutely a process that you could operationalize across a couple of different businesses. I see it.
Yeah. Yeah. Final point on this too is like, I told someone this the other day. I was like, medtech is awash in brilliant technologies and brilliant ideas and concepts. There is a dearth, it seems like, of really talented operators that know how to move the ball up the court, put the commercial strategy and the reimbursement strategy and all that stuff together, and basically mold these things into investable ventures and drive them forward with, the foot on the gas and a lot of horsepower.
Yeah. Here's my perspective on it. I think as medtech has become the regulatory climate and the legal, all the climates have become more and more complicated. We've become more and more specialized. And I think what we're missing is that real integrator and the person to be the connector that can bring all these various perspectives together and make decisions that benefit both the business and the patient. And so, you advance healthcare while advancing the business case. And you really need kind of a return to these people that are more like a general manager and an integrator amongst all of these complicated functions, because it's become a little bit siloed.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, man, this was good. This was good. I'm going to be laying in bed at like 3:30 a.m. tomorrow morning. I'm going to wake up and I'm going to be thinking about this operator SPAC model. I'm just
Well, let's get it all penciled out before this airs, and
yeah.
then we can have it all together.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, you've been really generous with your time. I know we went over here. I was like hoping that you didn't have a hard stop. So I really appreciate you giving the time here. So how we'll end it is like, just want to give you the floor to give any shout outs. It could be a book you read. It could be a poem that you've been ruminating on, anything you want to plug. Go for it here. The floor is yours.
Hey, Spencer, I just thank you for this time. Like, I've just really enjoyed my 20 years in medtech. I think the future is bright. Yes, there are headwinds, but together, we can definitely help continue to improve patient care and advance technology here in this space, because the future is bright.
Yep. Awesome. Awesome. Okay. Brent Lavin, principal at Ironwood Medtech Partners. You guys heard it. He's an absolute pro. If you are looking for someone to be that product owner, shaman, and drive your business forward and help you with all of the really difficult things in medtech that we talked about, you should hit up Brent. We're going to put your LinkedIn, we're going to put the website, all of that's going to be in the show notes. So if you guys want to find him and badger him and talk to him about your awesome medtech innovations, you'll know where to find him. And for everybody that tuned in and stayed on the whole time, like, I hope you guys got as much of this out of this as I did, because this was like incredibly invigorating. And there was like, honestly, a bunch of insights and things that I'm going to go like research and kind of tinker with after this. But Brent, thank you again. Seriously, so generous with your time and your insights today.
Awesome. It was great to talk today.
Yep. Take care, everyone. See ya.